Welcome back, Johnny Watchers. Johnny here with Johnny Watson Gaming, and today's video is somewhat of a different one for me. I don't do these very often, but I'm extremely lucky to have the cult legend that is that
A
is
legend in his own lunchtime.
that is Fred Reed. And Fred, thank you so much, so much for jumping on the call with me today.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I'm quite taken back by it because obviously to some degree you've um, what's the word you you've influenced me in my hobby journey through my life, really, from a young kid up
For better
until
or for worse.
yeah, for better or for worse, mate. Yeah, definitely up until now, and still influencing me. So thank you so much for that. So thank you for coming on. So a bit of context for the viewers out there. What's happened here? So I've spent the last year, to on and off. Obviously, with kids and stuff, it's very hard, but trying to replicate Fred's battle company from the is it the 180 White Dwarf battle report, which I think Fred might have a copy there.
It is 180.
180, yeah, I thought it was. So I spent the year trying to replicate that in as much detail as possible, and I finally finished it. And Fred actually on one of my videos come and commented on it, saying it brought back memories, this, that, and the other. And I got a lot of people started to say, Johnny, get Fred on a call and have a good conversation with him. And here we are. So Fred, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
The first thing really I want to sort of delve into really is how did you get into the hobby? What started it all for yourself?
Okay,
Even before you started working for GW, what?
That's actually really easy. Picture wavy lines moving across the screen as we travel back in time. The I was still in the army, and Space Crusade was released.
Yeah.
And they just happened to have it in our guardhouse. Somebody had bought it and just dropped it off there.
Right.
And a bunch of us just started playing it. So it technically wasn't a Games Workshop product. It was actually, I think, it was a Mattel product.
Yeah.
Or one of the two.
Was
anyway,
it Milton Bradley or something like that?
it might, yeah, MB Games. It was Milton Bradley.
Yeah.
But I liked the imagery, and it was cool, and it was a simple game to play. And that was my first touch with it. And then after I left the army and went back to Bristol, Bristol was one of the original 10 GW stores because there weren't many around in that days. And I found that particular GW. Now, in them days, they sold D&D and all kinds of books and weird cassettes full of death metal and a whole very eclectic kind of weird vibe where the staff kind of growled at people and played a lot of heavy metal music and ignored their customers. And it just so happened that the manager and the full-time member of staff were both veterans.
Right.
And it's a thing that people who are ex-military tend to find each other for some bizarre reason.
Yeah.
And it's also easy to talk to them because you have a shared set of experiences.
Yeah.
I didn't have a job at the time, but I still had money from being medically discharged. So I started hanging out there quite a lot. Started picking up painting the lead miniatures at the time.
So I assume you took to painting relatively quickly. Was that something that
yes,
it's a skill you seem to possess anyway.
From a very young age, being the youngest of 4 boys, I had done a lot of Airfix kits, Tamiya kits, military model.
Yeah.
Because it was my father's hobby.
Yep.
And therefore, if you wanted any kind of time or attention with my incredibly boomer father, you had to do what he wanted, not what you wanted. Yeah. So I started painting military models more than anything else. Right. So I had a base set of brush skills, idea of like color schemes, and at least had a color in between the lines with a paintbrush
Yeah,
anyway.
yeah. Sure.
And then I would probably spend 4 or 5 days a week just hanging out in the Bristol GW, not as a member of staff, with nothing better to do, just sat there painting miniatures. And then another full-timer position became available, and my interview consisted of the manager going, "Hey, do you want a job here?" And I was like, "Sure." And he was like, "Okay, can you start on Monday?" I was like, "Yeah." And that was it. Not a complicated process.
No. So you obviously took on. Was it an assistant role or something there at the time?
Just a standard sales assistant.
And
And
what sort of year would that have been roughly, Fred?
Christ, 1990-ish.
Yeah.
So 33 years ago.
Yeah. And what games were you? I mean, obviously being there, what games were you playing or enjoying?
Rogue Trader.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Road Trader was pretty simple.
The original. Shortly after I got in there, the 2 Chaos books came out: Slaves to the Darkness and
Realms of Chaos.
no, Slaves to the Darkness and The Lost and the Damned.
Right.
Which allows you to like randomly generate Chaos warbands of different powers and play like a skirmish Warhammer version.
Yeah.
There was, God, what's the really awful game with the cars? It was like Mad Max, where you had
with the orcs.
No, not Gorka Morka. This was actual people in a post-apocalyptic wasteland with little race cars with Gatling guns on the front.
Gosh, I don't know this one.
Yeah, it was ancient.
Comments below if anyone knows this. If Fred doesn't pick this, remember it. Comment.
I honestly can't remember. I mean, but we were also playing D&D in the store because we were selling it.
Were you still selling it in 1990? Were they?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
It might have been a little bit earlier than that, maybe. It was a long time ago. Yeah. I'm old. I can't remember. But yeah. So it was in those. Almost everything was lead and in blisters.
Yeah.
You had RTB01, which were the Beaky Marines. 30 of them come out. Yeah. You had the Rhinos, where you got 3 in a box.
Yeah.
And Land Raiders, where you got 2 in a box.
The good old days.
Yeah, like 2 Land Raiders was like a tenner.
Yeah.
So they weren't the greatest kits in the entire world.
Oh, you try buy one now for 10.
Oh yeah, they're like rock and roll shit.
Oh my god, yeah, they really are. It's mad. eBay prices are insane for those things.
Yeah,
it's awful. It's quite sickening, really.
But painting was something that I was very good at. I mean, and as a store, we were expected. You had quite a tight painting schedule. Okay. You would be sent. Like there were new miniatures coming out every week.
Yep.
And you were expected to have at least a reasonable quality version of it painted in the cabinet the day that they were released. You'd get them like a week early.
I didn't know that, actually. No.
And you were also expected to have 6 armies on display in your main armies cabinet.
Yep.
2 fantasy, 2 40k, and 2 of something else. Epic was a big one, or Space Marine.
That was actually my first game, Epic. That was the first game that got me fully into the hobby.
It was one of mine, actually. Adeptus Titanicus was a big one of mine. I used to love having a Warlord Titan with Terminator assault pods in the arms and in the head, and just walk up the buildings and go and just swarm them into just take over buildings. Yeah. So, and I was very, very good, even back then, at creating not like a super paint job, but a good paint job to a consistent standard very quickly. Like I could paint 10 Space Marines to a really nice cabinet standard in 15 hours.
Yeah, I've heard that you were you were the king at this. Army painting was your thing, but like
It
you say,
was.
but keeping to a standard that people would look at it and go, oh wow, I
Yeah.
want that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so my cabinets were always the Bristol's cabinets were always the envy of the chain as it was growing, um, and that's where the Griffins actually came to life. That particular piece of information, Games Day / Golden Demon was still relatively young in those days,
Yeah.
and they had just moved it to one of the big arenas, and they wanted to do the first of the big display battles where everything was laid out. You couldn't touch it, but it was like, "Ooh, that looks really, really cool.
Yeah.
Look, there's
Yeah.
that's the game that you want to play, but you don't have the space or the money."
Yeah.
And the guy that was organising it knew me from visiting my store because he lived relatively local to where I did, and used my store as as a part-time office sometimes. Because at that point, I was actually I was the manager of Bristol at that point. I'd actually gotten promoted.
Yeah.
And they said, what we want to do is an imperial refinery that's being attacked by Eldar and being defended by an entire company of Space Marines, but we don't want any of the core 9.
Right. Okay. So you don't want Blood Angels. You don't want
Space Wolves, Ultramarines,
yeah.
Dark Angels, nothing, none of
Right.
those.
Okay.
And it has to be bright so that the Marines are easily visible on this grey and blasted sort of like imperial / industrial scape.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. And so they also want the Eldar done as well, because they at the same time that I painted the Howling Griffins, I painted in a huge Beal-Tan army as well.
No, you did not. I did not know that. Please, have you got?
I did.
Have you got pictures of that? Have you got pictures of it?
The only reason that there are pictures of the Howling Griffins is because they made it into White Dwarf.
Yeah, which
we'll
come to in a second. Yes.
but that was also. So he said to me, "Okay, so I need a company of Marines." I'm like, "Really?" And he's like, "Yeah, plus vehicles and dreadnoughts and carriers." I was like, "Jesus Christ!" And I need a Beal-Tan force with at least 2 of each Exarch squad and at least 50 Guardians, plus support weapons and vehicles.
Jesus. So this was for Games Day. Was it Games Day 90 or 91 or something like that?
I can't remember. Honestly, can't remember.
So for Games Day, so this guy put it onto you to build 2 massive armies for display.
Yep. Which I would not own.
Right. Okay.
They belong to Games Workshop, and then I'm like, okay, what's in it for me?
Right.
And he was like, okay, I will basically give you all the lead you can eat. He basically said I could pick an army of my choice.
Yeah.
Of up to like maybe 4,000 or 5,000 points, and they would give it to me for free.
Right. Okay.
Which is why after that I ended up with one of the largest World Eater armies that you'd ever seen.
Well, and yeah, that's talked about as well. Actually, the World Eater army. We'll jump on that in a little bit.
But he sweetened it, and he said, "I can't promise it," but he had a lot of contacts with the studio, and at the time the studio was like this elite nirvana place that us retail plebes didn't get anywhere near. And he said, "I'm pretty sure I can get your stuff featured in White Dwarf."
Right.
Which would have meant that my miniatures would have been the first non-studio miniatures ever featured in a Games Workshop magazine.
Right. Now that is
which was a big deal.
Yeah.
And I was like, all right, for that, I'll give you what you want.
Yeah.
And then he went away and said they needed to be ready in X number of months. They give me plenty of lead time.
Yeah.
And if I remember rightly, and I could be wrong, I think at the time the Space Marine Compendium had just been released after Rogue Trader, and that contained all the stuff for the Badab Wars, which was the first solid mention of the Griffins.
Yes. Okay.
And I had to think about it, and I was like, Beal-Tan were the obvious choice for the Eldar,
yep.
because that would allow you to have a nice, good mix of X-Art Warriors and Guardians. And green and white would show up really nicely on the display table.
Yeah.
I had also been involved in a conversation with some of the higher ups at one of our meetings where they were talking about marine color schemes and the fact that all Marines were effectively Knights Templar, and therefore all of their color schemes had to be heraldic, either single colors, half and halves, or quarters.
Right. Yep. Yep.
And they had some pictures there of the Howling Griffons in a weird desert camouflage.
Yes.
And then one picture of one in the standard quartered.
Yep.
And I was like, red and yellow, that'd stand out. But the only problem is that the paints in those days weren't great.
Yes.
And the red and the yellows were the worst of them all.
Yep. Agreed.
The red was like painting with water, and the yellow was worse.
I mean, painting with yellow now is hard. Even now. So painting with the paints that we had back then. I mean, yeah.
The best way to paint yellow is to actually paint it flesh, like a light flesh. Highlight it as if you're going to have flesh-colored Marines, and then give it a yellow ink coat over the top of it, and that actually brings it up to a nice even yellow, warm all over the top of it.
I think when I did mine, I did something fairly similar, but I used an ink to brighten the yellow, because the yellow is always quite.
I didn't have any inks or any crap like that. I just had watery Games Workshop paints. So they look nice on a photograph. Just don't getting a bit. The yellow, especially, was really quite chalky.
Yeah.
To bring it up to, but keep it yellow, and then also it took a lot of work with the red to get it just to a good, decent, flat red, and then just doing very fine, bright orange, white highlights on the edges of the armor rather than trying to blend it. It was the only way that I could get them staying the right color. And the army list was really a mixture of what was available.
Sure.
In terms of in the range. Oh, by the way, was it you who asked about the weird librarian?
Yeah. So
the one with the
so there's.
I've remembered how I did it now.
So there's two librarians in the
there's a Terminator librarian with an Aegis. That came from the old Terminator box set, the metal ones with 8 Marines in it.
That one's. Yep, got that one. That one's easy. That one's easy.
And then there's one that looks like he's wearing a respirator and has long hair, with big hair.
Yes,
right?
yes, that's the one.
That was actually a basic Marine, and then I sculpted some detail onto the shoulder pad. And then I'm almost certain that the head is from a weird from Necromunda.
Right. Okay. I knew there must have been some form of sculpture.
Because Necromunda was super popular when it came out, and that was around about that time, and it's kind of appropriate with like the big sort of like swept back tall hair and a respirator on it. And I think I just literally sliced the head off and fitted it onto the top of a basic Marine model.
Yeah. Right, I knew it. And you'll see in my picture that I've got the old road trailer librarian instead in his place, because I couldn't work out for the life of me what you'd done. I'm just gonna go with this. I can't be bothered to work it out.
So yeah, it was. I just started working my way through them. I mean, and I truly learned to hate painting the color red and yellow.
Yeah. Especially quarters. I mean, bloody it's. Yes.
Oh, I learned that what I would basically do would be I would make sure that I would spray the miniatures white, which is unusual for me because I normally work from a black undercoat.
Yeah.
I would then do all the metallics, like in between the joints, the flex joints, anything on weapons and all the rest of it. I would then touch up the white to take it back to white, do the yellow bits, and not worry if I went on to the other parts, because the red would at least color the yellow.
Yeah.
It's one of the few colors it would cover, um, but at least allowed me to get like fairly neat from those parts of it.
Yeah, yeah.
I used there was the decals that I used were the old Warhammer Fantasy Bretonian decals for the shields.
Yes, I thought that might be
It's
something
the only
like
place,
that because
it's the only place I could find a Griffin.
yeah, there is, and it's in the book. I've got the I've got the book somewhere, and I was looking. I noticed that actually, and I wondered whether that'd be the case. So
Yeah, and then all the banners were hand drawn and hand painted.
yeah,
Particularly the commander's one, where he's got like the head of the Griffin.
that's yeah that was I love that banner is just fantastic.
With the
I
limited edition Games Day Space Marine Captain Mark 8 armor.
yeah. Yeah, and he's a fantastic model anyway. And then with that
And
banner,
also costs you a small fortune if you want one nowadays.
yes, he does. Yes, he does. If you go on eBay now, he is easily 60 quid, 70 quid easy for one tiny little model. He's unreal. But yeah, that banner's fantastic. I mean, I had to go at doing that myself. What the one when I was doing the replica of your army, my goal was to make sure I freehand as much as possible on the banners and stuff like that, because I could tell that's what you did. So I'm gonna try and copy this as much as possible. I'm not gonna skimp out of it. So I'm glad I did it really, because it's improved my freehand no end just by just sitting there doing.
There's a sad and ignominious end to the story, unfortunately. Is that they were set up at the Games Day at the display, and it looked beautiful, and pictures were taken of it, though I've never seen any of them actually laid out. But they were then packing everything up, and they put a person in charge of packing that table up who worked in the factory and didn't really understand what he was dealing with.
Oh.
And all of them were placed loose into one box.
Oh, God.
Bealtan and Howling Griffons mixed together into one medium-sized box, just piled on top of each other, sealed up, rattled. By the time they got back to Nottingham, they were completely trashed.
Oh, no.
So, like 4 or 5 months of my work completely trashed in one young person's disregard. And you could argue that there's a certain amount of common sense, but this is a person that just wants to go home. They're not a hobbyist. They don't understand it. They're given, here's boxes, pack this away. They're not given any packing equipment or packing stuff. The figure cases that they were originally packed in weren't even under the display table. They'd been put away somewhere else. So you can't blame them. But I was not pleased when I found it.
God, so when you did the battle report, was that before the Games Day?
Yeah.
So were they trashed after that? So they.
Yeah. So that's the order. Was basically they. I finished them. They were sent to Lenton. Well, it wasn't even Lenton at them days. It was the old site. The photograph was snapped of the entire army and then went into that month's White Dwarf. And then they liked the look of the army so much that they were like, these are really pretty. Let's do a battle report with them. I got invited up the month after that, and then Games Day happened the month after that.
Oh my
or
God, that's absolutely sickening. That is sickening. I was kind of hoping that maybe someone had bought them, or they got donated somewhere. Or...
They just got absolutely trashed in a box.
Oh.
It was like I asked to see them, and the guy that I did them for looked furious. He said, I can't. He said, I can't show you what's left. He said, I would have to restrain you from finding the guy that did it in the factory, because apparently somebody told me that literally there were like 70 loose marine arms rattling around in the bottom of the box because every arm had broken off of every single body. And a lot of the times the weapons were broken away. Two of the dreadnoughts had been mashed against each other and had been like falling into pieces because they were metal, and the super glue wasn't great.
And
Uh,
probably the saddest thing is that that army would probably still today be sitting in the museum now. They have, if
but
they
then so probably,
that is,
yeah.
oh my god. Do you know what? Well, I did not know that, and that's made me quite sad. uh,
But because of that, I actually got to have a second article done in White Dwarf about my stuff that wasn't the Howling Griffins,
right, which we're gonna
which was White Dwarf
let's
203.
let's jump onto that in a second then. But first of all, let's just wind back quickly onto the battle report. Was there anything bizarre, interesting about the battle report? Do you remember anything? How it was run?
I
Was you called in? Was you with Pete with these sort of these
basically
gods
got called
from?
up, and it was an interesting procedure
Mm,
because we had to make very detailed notes. You know, like the little maps that you see
yeah,
between each film, where you can see each of the little stands and the models are moving. We had to make those versions of that
go.
so that they reported it, and we had um, Polaroid cameras
Yes.
at the time, or just 35mm disposals, and we're basically given like a box of 20 of them. And I'll just keep taking pictures from different angles so that, and from above, to record the whole thing. Those aren't going to be used for the article, but we need to have a good idea of what went
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
And then I had to write a battle report afterwards. And then what they do is they use your maps that you draw
Yeah.
and the pictures that you took, and they recreate the battle in the proper photographic studio, placing the miniatures as they see fit so that they can get the proper shots that they got. So
Right.
the actual shots of the battle that are in the report were taken probably a month after the actual event.
Yeah.
Um, so, but the game itself was effectively a normal game. It was just me versus Adrian Wood. I mean, I have always been a little bit salty, even though I won, where it just seemed that every time I was getting ahead and there was a minor rules dispute, every time we went to one of the rules writers,
Yeah.
they favored him. Even in situations where I was like,
Really? Do you
and
think?
when I suggested to him
Yeah.
that we solve any of our disputes the way that we would have in the store, which was just rolling a dice for it,
As it says in the book, a lot of the time.
he wasn't having any of that. He would go straight to Jervis Johnson or Andy Chambers and say blah 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 blah, and they would automatically side with him.
How about that?
Even the thing that won me the game, okay, which was the fact that I managed to get my chief librarian
Yeah.
very close to his warp head
That's it.
and then rolled a goddamn vortex over his head, which stated in black and white that there are no saves possible from it. They still gave him the Aegis suit save that his warp head had.
What?
Uh,
Jesus.
and he flunked it, so he died. But that's just me being salty, quite frankly. And I've no reason to be salty because at the end of the day, I won. And he was not pleased that some despicable retail minion had come up and annihilated the studio's orcs.
So I mean, I guess that's a bit unprecedented. Like you said earlier, that was unprecedented having someone from the stores come in.
First person to ever do it.
Right. That's that. I mean, so.
The studio, when I joined up, the people in the studio, and they are now to some extent, were like gods.
Yeah.
They were the creators of the hobby.
Yeah.
And they were in this weird little part of headquarters where everything was super secret. And retail staff are renowned for being very enthusiastic and being incapable of keeping their mouths shut about anything that they see that's coming out in the future, and would have basically spoiled retail's carefully cultured release dates and plans by spoiling it. So I can't say I blame them, quite frankly.
No.
But I had to sign an NDA before I was allowed in there.
Wow. Jesus. That's
I don't blame them.
No. I mean, it's that's their IP and stuff, isn't it? They've got to protect. And
I mean, I was still part of the company, but it was very much a case of you're going to see stuff or overhear stuff about things that are coming out 18 months from now,
Yeah.
2 years from now. You cannot leak that information to the general public now. That will affect people's enthusiasm for products that are coming out in 3 months, 4 months.
Yeah, of course.
And I think what most people tend to forget about Games Workshop, and where is it? Is if you look through every piece of Games Workshop product, book, magazine, or whatever, you'll see that.
Yeah.
That is the logo for Citadel Miniatures.
Yeah.
Games Workshop isn't important. Citadel Miniatures is the company that is really what that company is all about. Everything that GW does, Black Library does, Forge World, events, everything is designed to do one thing and one thing only: sell more toy soldiers.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. And if somebody comes up with an idea for a thing or a product, if that's not going to sell more toy soldiers, they don't care.
Yeah.
It might not seem, it might say, oh, this will make us so much money. Don't give a shit.
Yeah. That's why everything turned into Marines. Now they just sell Marines now because that's the only thing they felt that sold, I suppose, or it is the only thing that sells.
It sells consistency to young beginner gamers.
Yeah.
Because they are simple to paint, they're cool, and there's a good, simple range with a lot of interchangeable parts, which they've made specifically like that. And those are aimed at people who want to join the hobby. And the beginners in the hobby have always been more important than anybody else.
Yeah.
I could pull up old reports from when I was an area manager where they basically proved that a brand new gamer spends 80% of his money in the first 2 years that he's a hobbyist.
Right. Okay. So this is why they push that. Get the new guys in. Of course. Yeah.
Yep. And then once you're established in the hobby and you've suddenly forgotten how to use deodorant, get out of our store and go and play at home. And that was always the driving force. It was always about bring new people into the hobby, get new gamers interested in the hobby. They are what keep the hobby alive. It ain't the veteran gamers that come in and spend, 20 quid on a new release once a month.
Sure. Yeah.
They're generally the loudest, but they're not the most important.
Yes. Agreed.
And it was always a philosophy that I completely agreed upon, where Games Workshop came to that. Because if you're not feeding new blood into the hobby, eventually the hobby dies.
But Fred, so going back then,
right.
Obviously you got into White Dwarf.
The
most tragic thing possibly to mankind happened.
Yeah.
And I've only just found out about it, and I've died a little bit inside. But then you obviously got the opportunity then to get a few more things back into White Dwarf.
I was for producing some cool looking stuff, but with a slightly different slant, and producing miniatures for stuff that didn't exist. One of those, the big one, was the Land Raider. For a long time, the Land Raider was a huge hole in the range between them stopping selling the original one and then the release of the super awesome kit that there is now.
Yeah.
There was about 5 years where there were no Land Raiders.
Albeit you could have a Land Raider in your army.
Oh, sure, you could field it, but there just weren't any to buy.
Yeah.
And I got challenged about that in my store and just said, well, why don't you just use a World War I tank as the basis for one?
Yeah.
And they were like, you can't do that, that's stupid, they'll look rubbish. And I was like, all right, give me a second. So I went and I bought one and I fiddled around with one. And I'm trying to find that. There we go. And I don't know if you can see that very well. I made that.
Yeah, I remember that. That's amazing.
Which is basically a World War I British tank with some bits from a Land Raider glued on it. But in that particular, they did an interview with me where, like, I did the 3 original Dark Angels Unforgiven characters. So you had Azrael, Asmodeai, and Ezekiel. And rather than doing them in green armor with Deathwing robes, I did the reverse.
Oh, lovely, yeah.
So they were in bone armor with the robes denoting the color of what they were. So a black robe for a chaplain, and a blue robe for the librarian. I also did a really cool model of Dead Dog.
That one at the top there?
Yeah.
Amazing.
That was from one of the old Marauder ogres, and I ended up chopping up the metal tank tracks from around the turret of the original Hellhound tank to make his flak armor from about 150 tiny bits of tank armor, and his I can't remember what's the bloody Ogrin shotgun called nowadays.
Oh, I don't know. I couldn't tell you.
But it was a Imperial Guard autocannon that he was carrying as a sidearm.
Yeah, no, brilliant.
And then what else have I got in here? Oh yeah, I had Chimadon, which is a Layman Russ with the multiple launch rocket system across the turret, and then the Chimerax from Epic, which was actually a Chimera mixed with the Bradley Tamiya kit with all the interior detail.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
So the back ramp was down, and there was all the interior detail with the seats and the tracks, and had a quad autocannon. What else have we got in here? Hang on. Some assassins, and then the other thing that I was famous for.
Yeah. This is the big one actually. This is one that everyone talks about. A friend of mine, I think you say he was area manager. I think you might have been his area manager actually.
Okay.
And he remembers the gunship breaking the glass cabinet or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's too heavy.
Yeah, it did. It broke the it cracked the shelf. I came in one morning and the shelf had collapsed and it had dropped onto the. I had it right. It was on the not the very bottom of the cabinet, which is where it should have been.
Yeah.
It was on the shelf above it, but it did drop onto a whole bunch of other stuff and kill it. But I had, because the whole thing was lead, and it was. Thankfully, there wasn't a lot of damage because I'd done it all. I had to pin the living crap out of it just to get it to stay together and not collapse under its own weight.
It must have taken ages to put together, pinning it like
yeah, because it with a hand drill.
Oh, yeah.
Because there were no electric pin vices in them days.
No.
There was a funny story when I got that for winning Manager of the Year. Right. And it's funny because there were two big prizes that year. And then the first one they were announcing, which was for the best cabinet, which I thought, shoe in for this one, was this really nice wooden box with like the complete paint range in it and a lot of nice paintbrushes, paint restorer, and slots to put. And it was like a fold-out painting station. And I was like, I'm fucking having that. Yeah. And I did win it. So I went into super grumpy mode. I was like, I should have won that. I've seen it. And then they called out my name for something else, and I literally didn't know what I'd won when I was going up to collect it. Right. Not the prize, the award.
Yeah. You just walking.
I had no idea that I'd won Manager of the Year because I literally tuned it all out because it was one of the first times that they'd actually awarded it.
Right.
And then I get up and I get basically a giant mail order box full of random metal parts shoved into my hands. I'm like, well, you are. Congratulations, you own a Thunderhawk. And I was like, really? That's what the fuck this is? Because it wasn't even available for sale at that time. They'd only made 4 of them up to that point. 3 of them were used on the Battle for Big Tooth River, right. And they were all crashed, where the Ultramarines reinforcements for the Praetorians had been trashed. Yeah. And one had been given to the CEO because he wanted one and who was going to tell him no. Yeah. It was never intended to be marketed for sale. It was done purely as an exercise in production by the factory manager. He'd actually gotten friends to sculpt bits of it. So it was never a particularly well-designed kit. No. And it came in this big box in about half a dozen different bags with no instructions. Ooh. So there was a lot of studying pictures of the built one going, is,
Is
that
that bit there?
that bit?
At the end, you built it and you had like 3 pieces left going, well, oh well, throw that away.
Yeah, those obviously weren't that important. Yeah, so yeah, that was fun.
Amazing.
And then I got promoted. I did a lot less painting after I became an area manager, and then I needed to supplement my income because they don't pay you a lot when you're retail staff in any company. And I started painting in my spare time
Okay.
and doing like odds and sods onto eBay just to keep money coming in.
Yeah.
But I was doing a lot of commission work. I was getting good money for it.
Right.
And then I'd been doing that for a year and suddenly realized that I was making more money painting miniatures part-time than I was working full-time in retail as an area manager.
Jesus Christ.
At which point I went, thanks GW, so long, and thanks for the fish. I quit and I started doing it full-time. And I did that for, Jesus, 10, 15 years. And I made good money at it. But again, because I wasn't trying to paint character models for the Golden Demon crowd, it was armies to a good standard in a reasonable time frame.
And was it just GW stuff, or was you also just doing historical?
I do what anybody asked me to, but it was mostly GW stuff. I ended up painting a lot of Forge World armies, believe it or not. I did a ton of Forge World tank companies and Elysians. I did a bunch of decor, but also a lot of Marines, and I could churn out Marines.
Well, you proved that.
Yeah, but you give me a squad of Ultramarines to do, I can paint an entire squad. I can paint a 10-man tactical squad of Ultramarines in a day.
Right.
Or I used to be able to.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, as age crept up on me and my eyesight started to fail, but I developed a micro tremor in my right hand, which didn't affect me working or existing, but when you're trying to paint faces and eye lenses and the heraldry on shoulder pads, I refused to let my quality drop, so that but my time to do everything started to increase to the point where it was no longer financially viable. Right. It was taking me 3 days to paint a squad, not one, because I had to constantly take breaks, or I'd be touching up mistakes. I'd spend half as much time repairing what I painted as I did actually painting. So I needed to find something else to do. And at that point, we discovered Dragon Con in Atlanta, me and my wife, because I then met my wife, moved to America. Now you're probably heard of like LA Comic Con, right?
Yep.
And you probably know what they are. A lot of people dressing up, a lot of stars.
Yep.
LA Comic Con is actually a really bad example of a con, because it's been almost completely taken over by the corporate Hollywood overlords.
Right.
And like trying to get into Hall D, which is where they do, I think, the big announcements. You basically have to dedicate your entire convention time to waiting in lines to get a ticket, to get a chance to get into one of those. And a lot of the fun aspects of going to a con have been killed at it.
Yeah.
Dragon Con is different. It is the last convention that is still truly owned by the people who want to go to it. Mm-hmm. If you can imagine 5 really big hotels in downtown Atlanta, connected by either sky bridges or tunnels, and 65,000 nerds crowded into there for 4 days, drinking non-stop, and anything that you can possibly think of that's nerdy, there are panels about it. And there are panels running from like 7 o'clock in the morning to sometimes 9, 10 o'clock at night. And there are 20 different tracks, everything from Skeptics to NASA to old British sci-fi classics.
Sure.
There are masses of photo shoots, and everybody gets drunk, everybody gets dressed up, and everybody's your friend.
Yeah.
It was truly like an eye-opening experience going to this. Mm-hmm. And they were like, holy shit, this is amazing. Mm-hmm. But then I saw somebody dressed up as an Imperial Guardsman. Okay, so cosplay. That became a new skill set that I could learn, but also incorporate a lot of my old skills. Yeah. And the micro tremor wasn't as important because I was painting big things rather than small things.
Sure.
And I just started initially doing it for fun and doing some small commission pieces. And then I actually started competing. I ended up on a television reality show. Yeah. Are you familiar with the program Face Off, where they do the makeup?
I've heard of it, actually.
So the people are competing to do like the big science fiction makeups. There was a cosplay version of it called Cosplay Melee. I was on the first episode. And what is hilarious is that I had in my head these plans of these certain things that I was doing, and they threw us for a loop on what I actually ended up having to make. And I defaulted to making something that looked an awful lot like an ultramarine veteran, which was kind of hilarious. But then I also started competing a couple of years ago. I won the North American Championships for cosplay with the Fan Expo Con Circuit, which are like 12, I think, really big conventions that they do around North America, where you have to win your local one and then you go up to the finals, which are in Toronto. And I competed with a suit of power armor for an Inquisitor.
Oh, fantastic. And so is this now your full-time work?
Yeah. I've not done very much for the last 8 months because I was quite sick.
Yeah, you mentioned
and, you know, but yeah, I do a lot of commission work. And it's a lot of things. It's like the normal small bread and butter commissions, single weapon or a particular specialized, like an iconic piece for somebody's cosplay, and they'll make the rest themselves, down to making full suits of armor. I also do some stuff for GW themselves as well.
Do you really? How about that?
Well, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but are you familiar with the grand narrative that they do over here?
The grand narrative? No, I've not. I don't.
It's a 4-day event in Atlanta, and basically it is your opportunity to come to this giant gaming event, and there are 3 packs. You've basically got Imperium, Chaos, and everybody else, or the Xenos, and it creates lore. Mm-hmm. Stuff that's written up about in White Dwarf. It goes into the books. It becomes canon. So it's your chance to actually shape canon in what you do. And the events is the really big drive on it is to play the game for what it was originally intended, to have fun, to meet new people. It's very much narrative driven. It's mission driven. Everybody is encouraged to dress up.
Right.
And the 3 packs have a packed commander attached to each one. And the first one was a year ago. It was in New Mexico. And there was the Imperium, which was led by the Lord Militant Castigane, who was a commander of the Inquisitor Stormtroopers, who was put in charge of the Imperial forces, played by me. And then there was Iliath Starblade, who was an Eldar Corsair, former Spirit Seer, who was played by my wife. And then Kran the Beast, who was a former Imperial Knight pilot, now a Chaos Knight, who ran the Chaos Forces. And you stay in character. We gave briefings in characters. We would go around and give little bonuses to things. We would... the whole idea was to make sure that everybody was enjoying themselves rather than sticking to the rules.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
There were bonus rules thrown in.
So is this a bona fide GW event then? Is it?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I mean, there were people flying over from the UK and from
Wow.
Canada all to take part in the one this year in Atlanta. And let me see if I can get my
I was
camera to
gonna
work.
say, I mean, show some of
There must
the.
be a way to spin the camera around.
There will be. Yeah, there'll be a little.
No, not you. Is it that in full screen? No, not that. No.
Yeah, if you can show the viewers some of the work that you've been doing and
Ooh,
stuff, that
what's
would be.
that? That's a spin.
There we
Yes,
go.
here we go.
Yeah.
All right. So this is. Are you familiar with the video game Inquisitor Martyr?
I know of it. I've never played it, but I know.
Have you seen the super cool video of the Inquisitor fighting the Nurgle Marines and that sort of thing in it?
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, I saw that. I was like, I need to make that. So I contacted Core Games and they sent me a whole bunch of high res pictures of the armor, including some concept art that was never released to the general public,
Wow.
which is what that is. So
Amazing.
I looked at it, and this was one of the few pictures that they sent me that had the details of the back. So I then went away and made not that. That's just something that's sat there. So there it is. There is a full two-handed thunder hammer, a full storm shield with a dead heretic nailed to the front, and so
it just
like
looks like your hobby's got bigger, not.
yeah. So that's
Which is
one of the
great.
shoulder pads, and then you've got there's one of the legs with all of the details and the handwritten purity seals and oath of moment, and that's the thunder hammer. And then the other shoulder pad, you probably can't see it very well, but that's the Imperial Eagle embossed on the top of it. And then because I'm super sad, you can probably see this here, that
Yeah.
there is embossed on the shield, there is actually High Gothic
Yes.
over the whole thing. And every circle is the end of a word, and every cross is the end of a sentence. So you read it from left to right going along, and it's actually the Litany Hatred from the Inquisition and the Grey Knights that is actually across the entirety of the shield, running from translated from English to Latin and then transcribed onto that. And so I built this for a competition 3 years ago. You also got Steve the Scullopede on the top. Right. His head actually kind of spins from side to side and his eyes light up. And there's actually a Bluetooth speaker in there, so it plays like Gregorian chants as I'm walking around.
Oh, amazing. That's insane.
So that's that. So when I was introduced as the character commanding the Inquisition forces this time, I was an Inquisitor, but I was just in like an inquisitorial robe with a leather collar, with some other bits. And then on day 2, I turned up in black combat gear with red body armor, with like an Elysian pattern lasgun with a grenade launcher. And then on Saturday, it was right, we're going all in. I march into battle in full power armor. My wife was playing the something leader, and she was wearing like white, almost like geisha type robes with an ornate headpiece and pretty makeup, and she was very softly spoken, and was really good at like engaging people and talking them round to her way of doing things. By the time they'd fully committed to following her, and it was way too late, some of the other imagery started to appear on her robes, like maybe the purple armor with weird tentacles coming out of it. The same on her shoulder armor, and the Zinchen staff was a bit of a giveaway.
Yeah.
And then you actually begin to notice that they're like, oh, there were actually Zinchen symbols hidden in other places if you looked for it. And she grew nasty, scary fingers with weird tentacle bits coming out of it with scary nails. And on the very last day when they were shutting it all down, and her faction had won, um, she came out with that on.
Amazing, amazing.
So she'd actually ascended to demonhood for what she'd done. And I won't tell you about. No, that's not true because people have actually talked about it on YouTube. The Inquisitor had basically become corrupted by the command entity on this planet that we'd all been trapped on, and had been corrupted by it because it was a dark age of technology AI. And he ends up being executed by his own troops.
Amazing. Oh, fantastic.
And Elle had basically ascended to so her, Skaneweaver, her Chaos Sorceress, had now ascended to demonhood and had basically escaped with all of her followers. Some of the Imperium managed to escape because they did okay, and the third commander was Clegg, who was an ex-Imperial Guard sergeant that had basically gone insane after the fall of Cadia and had fallen to chaos and was really starting to move towards becoming cornate. Yeah. And the way that the narrative was supposed to work was if he won, he managed to retain his sanity and would remain chaos undivided. If he lost, he'd give in to the beast and become corrupted and fall to the forces of Khorne, and he would have gotten to wear this on the last day. So GW asked me to make this, knowing what the path could be, and I made this beautiful piece, and it never saw the light of day.
Oh.
Because he managed to do well enough that his character did not fall. Oh. So the characters, the players, their results, the objectives that they do, really have an effect on the narrative as the game progresses throughout the weekend, the different missions that are given off, the bonuses that they get. And this was a really cool thing that they asked me to do. Elle's character had to appear as different things to the different races.
Right, okay.
Because, so the Tau commanders saw a Tau ethereal.
Yeah.
The Tyranny players saw a Gene Stealer cultist.
Right.
The Votan players saw a Votan AI representative. The Necron players saw another Necron Lord. So I made masks that she had that she could put up in front of her face whenever she was talking to them. And it also got all the players talking about why does she appear to be different things to different people.
Amazing.
Those are here.
Oh, amazing.
So that was for the Eldar Shadow Seer. There's the Votan.
Yeah.
Let me turn on the light. There's the Necron Lord. That was the Goblin. There's the Tau Ethereal. And there's the Gene Stealer cultist head. So she could appear to be different things. This is my workshop, by the way. Or what passes for a workshop. These are the trophy racks that our Chaos Sergeant was carrying on the back of his armor. So he had a dead guard officer's head, which is gross, a couple of skulls and a marine helmet, and then that's bits of his armor, which is like blood spattered and torn. He was armed with, well, this is the head of it, a two-handed chain glaive with a double blade on it.
Nice.
Suitably cornate. But it was a great event.
Yeah, I mean, it's great to see that you're so heavily still in the hobby in one way or another.
Absolutely.
I was wondering whether you have anything to do with the hobby post GW, but clearly you're as much in it as ever before, really.
Yeah. You can take the boy out of GW, but you can't take the GW out of the boy. You know what I mean?
No, agreed.
I mean, and I didn't show you this, did I? Which is the fact that I am actually building a marine downstairs, and it would have been a crime if it was any other chapter other than
the Howling Griffons.
The Griffins.
It would be an absolute crime if it wasn't them. No, that's fantastic. That's so beautiful. That is really nice.
Yeah, so you got all right the way down towards the individual feathers sculpted
Yeah, wow.
for the whole thing. And it's amazing what you use to actually create these sort of things. Like I needed a piece to support the top knot on the top. That's actually the part of a leg of a wooden chair.
It's just being creative. It's the same thing as that tank, the Land Raider tank. It's just find whatever works, isn't it? You know.
Yeah, it really is. And there's an awful lot of that when you're building cosplays, where you just turn, you're walking around like thrift stores and old secondhand places, and you go, I don't know what that is now, but it'll turn
Yeah.
into something later.
Yeah.
Uh,
Exactly. No.
in it with piles of garbage. Oh, I would like to show you the wife's navigator as well, because that is one
Please.
of, I think, one of her most beautiful pieces. You've got everything here from her staff. There's like a built-in planetary like thing in the
Yeah.
middle,
Oh
and
yeah.
all these fake bits that look like they should move and rotate. And then there's her robe, and the details that she worked into this are insane. Like when you get up to her breastplate, it looks beautiful, but then when you get closer, you realize that on
Oh.
every single part of it, there are actually stellar constellations,
Oh yeah.
like
Yeah. Yeah.
painted
Yeah.
onto
Yeah.
each one.
Wow.
All of the jewels, the fake like ancient navigational equipment, functional pouches, all of you can't see the back of it. All of the work that she did with heat transfer vinyl, with like flames and an eagle and star patterns, and because she's super sad, she was trawling through older books which had um, sector maps.
Right.
She added these on. Each of those is actually a diagram of a sector map with stable warp routes, and each circle denotes the population and the size of the population in each system, and then the jewels, depending on their size and their color, donate um, what sort of planets they are:
Wow.
agricultural, staries, adeptus mechanicus, that sort of thing.
And
So
and is
each
that
one of
is
those,
that all built out taken from research through
yep,
lore?
from trawling
Wow.
through old books and old codexes
Jesus
and that sort of thing.
Christ. I mean
And
that's
those are everywhere.
wow.
You
That's
know?
amazing.
And then all of the details that she added on here,
I mean,
you know.
but both of you are extremely talented. I mean, this is absolutely
Well,
fantastic.
I am very lucky in the fact that I married a seamstress,
Mm. Yes.
and she's as big a giant nerd as I am, if not more so.
Oh, fantastic. That's amazing. Oh, no, Fred, thank you so much for coming on today.
My pleasure.
And it's been a bit of an eye opener, really. I'd like to say I didn't know that about the Howling Griffons army. That was very sad, but it
Yeah,
sounds like it's all worked out really well in the end, though. So it's one of those things. These armies aren't there to last forever anyway. So
they're not. I mean, and the very fact the fact that they got destroyed is sad, but they were never mine to start off with. Um,
true, but
and the fact that they got trashed made them feel guilty and allowed them to do another article about my stuff. And that
exactly.
was my stuff. And I did own it for quite some time until I sold them all because I needed the money. Uh,
That happens, unfortunately. That happens, but no, yeah,
but
absolutely
if
brilliant.
anybody is interested, by the way, if you just tell them to go to frednowdesigns.com, we have a website,
Yes,
and look us up on Facebook or Instagram, same thing. And if
yes,
they want to see plenty of the pictures of the stuff, like the costumes that we've made for 40K, I do a lot of work in progress pictures on there so
mm,
people can see how I did it.
yeah,
And if anybody's got any questions about wanting to get into this kind of shit, just message me. I'm more than happy to talk to people.
yeah, and I vouch for that. Very approachable, very approachable. Yeah, please, if anyone's interested in what Fred's doing now, head over to his website. It is a beautiful thing to see. I have ventured on it myself. So yeah,
The link is in
Fred.
the
I'll
bio.
put a link in the description when we put this out, Fred. So there should be a link that goes straight through to it. Also, I'll put a link to your YouTube as well. So Fred does have a YouTube as well. So if you're someone who likes to follow you guys on YouTube, Fred's there. I don't know how much you upload to that, but
It's intermittent. I mean, there's some weird little bits and bobs that we've done from conventions,
yeah,
and we did some sort of like small podcasty type things.
Yeah.
There's about half a dozen of those. But everything fell apart early last year when I got diagnosed with the crap that I'm dealing with now. So.
yeah. But I'll put a link to that as well, so people can find your stuff that you have done, and maybe in the future you do start adding some more stuff to it as well. So yeah, hopefully you get a few more followers from doing this. Yeah, Fred, I'm gonna have to put it there because it's we have been chatting for some time now, and I've loved every single second of it. Honestly, absolute single second. Thank you so much.
My pleasure, mate.
It's it's 20 past 2 now for me in the morning. So,
God, Jesus Christ!
the
You
missus
can go to
is gonna
bed.
wonder where I am. Yeah. So no, like I say, thank you so much for taking the time to sit and talk to me about your past, about GW, and all the things that you did. Yeah, it's for me. That's a bit of a well, sort of a bit of a hero, really, in terms of
Thank you.
where I come from and what I've what I've taken from the hobby and what you've done is what you've given to me. So yeah, having the opportunity to sit and talk to you has been an absolute privilege. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
So guys, like I say, everyone who's watching this, there's going to be links down below. Please head over to Fred's website if you're interested in that the cosplay stuff. And I'll send.
If people have specific questions that they drop in the comments and I'm not paying attention, give me a nudge and I'll answer them.
Yeah. Fred does take a little while to get back to you.
Hey, I'm old, all right? I'm allowed to. I have to wake up.
But he does get back to you, so that's the main thing. So yeah, please give him some time. Dear. Right, Fred. I will hopefully speak to you very in the future. Hopefully, we can keep in contact in some way or another.
No, well, you've got your battle force done. Now you have to do the entire company.
Well, yes. I hesitate on that because I know how hard that's going to be. But yes, I've been. You're not the first person to be challenging me to do that, so I think I might.
Yeah,
don't. I think I might. I don't know. I think I might have to try. I've got 3 Razorbacks sitting down here ready to go. So if I'm kind of prepared, and I have got a Land Raider somewhere sitting up there somewhere.
Good Lord.
So it's in the mind, but I might.
It's possible.
I've got a Bretonian army to do first, so I've got to work on these guys first.
All right.
But anyway, Fred, thank you so much. And I will speak to you very soon, mate. Have a good one.
All right. Good night.
Be safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, mate.